Welcome back, and thanks for joining us for part 2 of our conversation with NIH. We are continuing with Dr. Susan Gregurick, the Associate Director for Data Science and Director of the Office of Data Science Strategy at NIH. And Susan, I think a good place to resume the conversation, pick things back up here, would just be talking, of course, about the COVID-19 pandemic. That has been something that's been front of mind for a lot of federal agencies. And, I think NIH in a lot of ways has been at the tip of that spear. And so just tell me a little bit more about, the efforts there and how everything that we've been talking about, the data efforts, have been a really important part of responding to the pandemic.
Yeah, thank you. What a great question. Oh my goodness, for the past 2.5 years, COVID has been a night and day, 24-hour, 7-day-a-week activity. And it's just now getting to the point where it's not a hair on fire activity, but a really, really good pace and a lot of data science happening within NIH to address COVID-19. So I just want to highlight a few of our activities and a shout out to a few of our institutes who are leading in our way to address the pandemic with data, starting with the Radx program. I work on the Radx program, Rapid Accelerated Diagnostic Technologies. You've probably heard of Radx. It's brought a lot of rapid home testing technologies to everybody in America. It's been fantastic. There are 4 main components to Radx. There's Radx ATP, essentially, advanced technologies that make it rapidly to the marketplace, that has actually provided those home testing technologies. Think of it as like the Shark Tank, where there's a lot of really good ideas out there that are happening in the research community and in industry, and they funnel down through a variety of processes to actually make it to FDA approval and to get those testing technologies out to the community. There's also a Radx RAD component to our work, and that's sort of radical new testing devices. That could be wastewater treatment, or it could be really innovative PCR testing that's also rapid and out in the hands of the public right now. So those new and innovative ideas coming also from academics and small businesses have been very impactful. Then there's the Radx underserved populations. COVID is an equal opportunity virus. It hits everybody, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it hits everybody in the same way. Mm-hmm. And some of our populations have been very affected by COVID. And so underserved populations, and Radx is really getting testing devices and other ways to address the COVID pandemic to those underserved populations. And then there's the digital health technologies, that Care Evolution, for example, or those devices on your mobile phones. All of those contribute to ways in which we can rapidly get people information about COVID, get testing for COVID, and ways to get vaccination for people. So they're generating a lot of data, and it's really unusual data. It's not your typical research data per se, but it's very valuable. It'll help researchers understand the progression of COVID in the communities now, but also to sort of think about how we can address new and evolving strains of COVID or other pandemic diseases. And so we are collecting all of that data. All of that data is being collected. It's a lot of data, and it's a lot of heterogeneous data. We've worked to think about innovative ways to harmonize that data, because one of the harder things about data science is actually making data useful in a way that's harmonized. So through common data elements and through other really innovative semantic ways to harmonize data, we're actually harmonizing quite a bit of that data. We're going to make it available this fall through a Radx Data Hub. This will be a sort of cloud-based way for researchers to engage with that data, bring their own data, for example, if they're interested, and really investigate all of the way that the COVID has spread across our country and what testing data can provide in terms of answering research questions. So I'm excited about Radx. It's a collaboration with many institutes and many academics. Then another interesting capability that we've stood up because of COVID, and this is led by the an institute, NIBIB, Biomedical Engineering and Imaging Institute, is the MIDRIC project, a medical imaging data resource. There's a lot of really good data coming from CT scans, for example, from patients who have had COVID. Gathering all of those radiological data harmonizing it to a very high level, making it available for researchers and making it AI friendly has been the goal of MDRIC. And this is a wonderful collaboration between NIH and societies such as the American Radiological Society and academic institutions. And so that data is now available in the cloud for researchers to look at ways in which they can understand the progression of COVID in the human body through radiological images. One of my favorite projects that I think is incredibly impactful is the National COVID Cohort Collaborative, the N3C. It's led by the National Center for Advanced Technologies, NCATS. This is a partnership between all of the NCATS awarded clinical and translational science centers and the NIGMS Idea State Clinical and Translational Research Centers, the CTSAs and the CTRs. They are gathering electronic healthcare derived data into a cloud-based platform, and it's huge. I think they have probably well over 3 million participants, well over 1 billion data records for researchers to investigate in a very sophisticated analytic platform. And researchers are investigating what we can learn about COVID from clinical and medical records. I think they're also now linking in other types of data, such as imaging data, health and statistics data. Researchers have been able to mine that data using sophisticated AI algorithms and try to understand who might be at risk for long COVID. This is a really compelling and important question. I want to point out one of the researchers, Melissa Hendel and her team, have actually developed an algorithm to, with about 85% accuracy, actually identify who might be at risk for long COVID and what might their prognosis be. And so these are just wonderful data sets, testing data through Radx, imaging data through MDRIC, and clinical and related data through the N3C. There are other platforms that are coming online now as we start massive amounts of clinical trials for long COVID. We'll see more data sets and more data platforms coming online in the next year or so. So stay tuned. We're not done with COVID, and I'm sure COVID's not done with us, but we are going to have that data for researchers to understand COVID now, but also to really be ready to address another pandemic. Should it happen, God forbid, in the future, we'll be ready.
Sounds like a lot of irons in the fire there.
Yeah.
A lot of great stuff to hear there. One thing I do want to underscore in all of that is something that seems to really be an administration-wide priority, and that is that focus on underserved populations, using the data to shine a light on the conditions for some of those underserved communities. And that just seems to be like a really a huge thing you guys are doing in an incredible way here.
Yeah.
Are there other examples of NIH doing just that you'd like to share?
There are, and I want to give a shout out to our administration and also to our leader, Dr. Larry Tabak, who has a very particular passion in this area. And through his support and his leadership, we were able to launch last September a program to address health disparities and health inequalities in underserved populations through our program AIM Ahead. So AIM Ahead is a large network that works with HBCUs, Hispanic serving institutions, tribal colleges and universities, to really think about ways in which we can understand the use of electronic healthcare and related data, make it AI ready. It's often quite messy, and work with communities so that they can use this data to address their questions in health equality and health disparities research. So within the past year, we've been able to stand up the large network. We have launched a number of fellowships and researcher programs. There's now a nascent database partnering with OCHIN that has quite a bit of data, and we're rolling out the capability for researchers to access this data so that they can work on health-related health disparities and inequalities questions. And I think that we have a bright future in artificial intelligence and health equality. So I'm looking forward to how this progresses in the future.
Mm-hmm. To go back to the cloud piece of things, of course, the cloud is putting into action all of the things we've been talking about happening out, in the field. But it seems like from a cost savings perspective, from a time savings perspective, it is also that component of things as well. Can you go into a little bit more detail of how the cloud is doing just that?
Absolutely. So people may not realize that if you have petabytes of data that you want to make accessible, you do need to store it and make it computable. That's a challenge. That's a really big challenge. Also, searching for data in petabytes of data is another great challenge. So I want to tell you the story of the Sequence Read Archive, SRA. We sequence many things, humans, of course, which is controlled access data, but other organisms, of course, COVID, viruses, but chickens, rats, fish, plants, all of that data, that sequence data, is most of it is housed through NCBI's Sequence Read Archive. And this is really a tremendous resource. There's over 52 petabytes of sequence data that's in both Google and AWS. So that's a lot of data, and it could be quite costly. But we've done a number of really creative things to leverage what the cloud has to offer to improve the efficiency of storing and managing petabytes of data. In this case, it's sequence data, but what I'll tell you is true for pretty much everything. The first thing we did is that we partitioned the data in hot and active compute in both of our clouds, and in cold storage or in deep freeze. And so if data is new and it's just been published on, it's very likely that researchers will be interested in it. As data progresses in time, it's less access. So at that point, it goes into cold storage. Of course, it doesn't go away. It's indexed and searchable. If a pandemic comes up, for example, people can pull that data out and work with it. So the benefit of putting the data in cold storage is that we're able to save almost $10 million, and that's a huge savings for NIH. But the other benefit of being in the cloud is just the scale in which analytics can run. So recently, an intramural researcher at NCBI was able to take quite a bit of transcriptomic sequence data and do an analysis. Basically, it's a sequence alignment. It's called BLAST in the cloud. They were able to analyze 500,000 bits of information or transcripts in less than 2 hours for maybe $200. That's huge. Having algorithms in the cloud like BLAST, being able to pull large amounts of data together and do the analysis, it's very hard to do that at that cost point and that efficiency in your local compute cluster. But in the cloud, it's really not that hard. And the take-home message is, there's a lot of ways in which you configure your analytics in the cloud. You can optimize for different things, and you can really do some high-powered analytics at a really reasonable rate. And that's another benefit of the cloud. And if you're not really that facile with cloud, there's ways in which we work with our cloud service providers, professional engineers, to enhance our analytics pipelines. And we have ways in which we create something called Cloud Lab, as I've mentioned earlier, which is sort of a sandbox for researchers to come and explore the cloud, try different configurations, try cost modeling, what your analytics pipeline might look like in the cloud. So this is something that we are actively developing, and we're hoping to get it out to the researchers within this next year. And I think that will make a big difference, because I know that there's a little bit of a lack of understanding about how to use the cloud. But I think that once you explore it, you'll find that in some cases, this is really a very, very powerful tool.
Well, great that there is that sandbox environment that people can kind of get their hands dirty and get a feel for things before they do move to the cloud. That culture change piece of things, I think, is a huge thing that is being considered in all of this. I'm really struck by all the lines of effort that NIH is up to. And case in point here, there's one big project that I think is worth unpacking, and it's a little wordy. I want to make sure I have the whole thing spelled out here. It's the Science and Technology Research Infrastructure for Discovery, Experimentation, and Sustainability, or STRIDES initiative. Just offhand to say that. And how is the STRIDES initiative making it easier for NIH-funded researchers to have access to these large data sets, which has been a theme throughout this entire conversation?
Yeah, it's just been really a huge culture change, both for NIH and our intramural researchers, as well as the extramural community, and how we actually share data and make it available to researchers by, for example, standing up data platforms that leverage Google or AWS or Microsoft Azure, our third cloud service provider. We have, as I said, over 173, and that was back in June, I believe, so I'm sure that it's quite a lot larger now. 173 petabytes of data in 3 cloud service providers, which is probably, in aggregate, the largest amount of open data for researchers to work with in the cloud. So that's been tremendous, and the amount of savings is astronomical. But through working with our cloud service providers, we've also offered training to researchers, to graduates, to undergraduates. So over 4,400 people have been trained thus far in everything from how do you set up a cloud infrastructure to how do you do advanced analytics in the cloud, like artificial intelligence. We've also, actually computed a lot in the cloud. I think it's over 220 million compute hours now. So it's
Wow.
It's just amazing. It's clear that researchers are really taking advantage of the cloud. So we want to enhance that through my office and the work that we do, and in partnership with our Center for Information Technology. We are setting up Cloud Lab for researchers where we have focused on the idea state. As I mentioned, they do have a Cloud Lab. They are working with Google. Google software engineers are working to bring their platforms and their analytic tools and data sets in this Cloud Lab environment. We'd like to roll that out for researchers at large. Many of our intramural researchers have been experimenting and thinking about how they can move their analytics to the cloud. Dr. Harry Shraga, who was at the National Institute of Bioengineering and Imaging, who's now, I believe, at Janela Labs, has been working on 3D images. He's moved his pipeline and his analytics to the cloud. He worked with, I believe it was AWS software engineers to really enhance the AI capabilities. It really enabled him to do very large-scale analytics in the cloud. I'd love to enhance more intramural researchers to explore and utilize the cloud. We have very strong computational capabilities at NIH in our intramural research program. At one point we were I think we still are in the top 500 for compute through our Beowulf HPC Center. Leveraging the hybrid infrastructure between HPC and cloud is a new horizon that I'd love to see explored. So there's a lot of opportunities that Strides has provided just in moving data to the cloud, ensuring equal access to data, ensuring that researchers can compute on that data. I'd love to see where this goes in the future as we think about Strides 2.0, which is what we'll be working on this coming year.
All right, stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
A lot of things to mark on the calendar and keep an eye out for.
Yeah, absolutely.
So much of this conversation has been, things that are being put into practice by NIH. But of course, if you take a step back behind the scenes, all of this is being mapped out from the data strategic plan that NIH is, not just putting into practice now, but looking down the horizon for the next couple of years, the goals and the statements and the action plans that NIH wants to put into practice here. Let's unpack that for a little bit here of, what are those key pillars of that data strategic plan and how do they line up with what we've been talking about here?
Oh, thank you. What a great question. I live the strategic plan every day. Our office was created to really make sure that strategic plan, which was written in 2018 by our Scientific Data Council, actually lives. It's not a plan that's just a document. It's actually a living North Star for NIH. And my office's goals is to make sure that we implement as much catalytic activities across NIH to enable the goals of the strategic plan. So there are 5 goals. Data infrastructure. So clearly Strides has been our pillar of data infrastructure. That strategic plan laid the foundation and enabled us to negotiate with our cloud service providers to really make data accessible and affordable in new and creative ways. That has been an awesome activity. But there are other things that we can do in data infrastructure. For example, we'll be exploring with a partnership with the Department of Energy the role of quantum computing. Quantum computing and data are a natural fit, but in the biomedical sciences, we lag behind some of our chemistry and physics counterparts. So we'd like to explore the relationship between data and quantum computing. I think that would be something that we could do. Hybrid computing is certainly an active area of research that we could also explore through our strategic plan. So data infrastructure is a really big component. A second pillar, and it's something that I'm also quite passionate about, is enhancing fair, findable, accessible, interoperable data and care, making sure that we're taking care of the data in terms of tribal communities, respecting the data contributors, feeding back and letting them have a role in data sovereignty. Actually, the data is theirs, so data sovereignty in tribal communities is incredibly important. That's something that we'll see expanded in the future. But creating that fair and care data ecosystem, ensuring that repositories live to the goals of the OSTP desired characteristics of data repositories is a goal for NIH. Creating that data ecosystem that connects as a fabric between data repositories, making it easier for researchers to find and use data. So DataCite is an example of making sure that we do enhance our data ecosystem. Another goal is, really leveraging technologies that are either in other fields or in other agencies. So creating and enhancing software, for example. We have a wonderful partnership with NSF in smart and connected health for data and AI. And this is an ability for NIH to really bring in new ideas in computer science, statistics, mathematics, and data science to address hard problems in data science. So this has been an ongoing partnership for many years, and I'm very, very grateful to my colleagues at NSF for their partnership. Another goal is really to build a strong and diverse data science workforce, both at NIH and our colleagues, but also in the research community. And so some of the things that we have started building are data science programs in underserved populations, working with Idea State, minority institutions, tribal colleges. We are just now standing up a tribal epicenter that focuses on data. I'm really excited about this. Mm-hmm. There may be additional data activities in tribal sovereignty, which particularly align potentially with Radx that I'm really excited about. So this is something that I think there's a lot to do here in creating diverse and strong data science across the country. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly in all of the strategic plan, is our data management and sharing policy. Sustaining data policies is the fifth pillar. Our data policy is going to be a culture change. I have to tell you, it's really kind of, I'm scared, but I'm also excited because this will really test the mettle of data science for NIH. All researchers, whether you're going to be funded through a typical grant like an R01 or contract or another transnational authority, or you're an intramural researcher, will be submitting data management and sharing plans starting January 25 of 2023. Those plans need to articulate how the data will be managed in the lab, how the data will be shared, which data, which metadata, where will it be shared. It's a very aggressive data management plan that folks need to really think about as they're planning their experiments. Think about the data, think about fair data, put it in your plan, and then live it. Share your data, make sure that others can find it and make it accessible. So this is a lot. We'll be working with the community as we have. In fact, tomorrow there'll be the first part in a two-part series to help researchers and NIH community understand how do you construct a data management sharing plan. What are some of the things you need to think about? We have been doing extensive training in the community and at NIH on what is a reasonable data management sharing plan. We know that the community is broad and people have different expectations for data sharing. We understand that, but we want researchers to sort of understand what are some of the main elements that we hope to see in your plan, and we want to help you, and my office is really leading that, help you implement sharing data in data repositories, in generalist repositories, working with us to get your data cited, and enabling researchers to find it and compute on it to address new questions. So that plan is exciting. The policy will be a sea change for NIH, and I'm just so ever grateful to be able to work with my colleagues at NIH to make that plan really happen.
Well, it's great to see that strategic plan is, as you said, a living document that's being put into action here. And I think it really puts a bow on this whole conversation of putting data into practice here. I learned a lot, and thanks so much for sharing all this with me.
Thank you so much. It's been delightful. It's been a lot of fun. I hope that you'll invite a few of my NIH colleagues to come as well and do even more of a deep dive in some of the topics, because
don't worry about that. We'll make time for them as well.
Awesome.
I'd like to, again, thank today's guest, Dr. Susan Gregurick, the Associate Director for Data Science and Director of the Office of Data Science Strategy at NIH. I'm your moderator, Jory Heckman, and you're listening to Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on the Cloud Exchange.